The complete story of the Book of Psalms like you've never seen it before, revealing hidden messages that will transform your faith. Have you ever opened the Book of Psalms and felt a stirring in your heart that words alone could not explain? Have you ever wondered why these ancient songs, prayers, and poems have captivated generations for thousands of years, continuing to inspire, comfort, and challenge believers today? The Psalms are not merely historical relics or religious poetry. They are living expressions of human emotion, divine revelation, and spiritual intimacy with Jesus. They reveal the depths of our joy, sorrow, gratitude, and longing, while pointing us to God's unwavering love and faithfulness. From the cries of despair to the shouts of triumph, the Psalms give voice to every feeling we experience, showing us that God welcomes honesty, vulnerability, and authenticity in our relationship with Him. They guide us through seasons of fear, doubt, hope, and thanksgiving, illustrating that true worship is not just in song or ritual, but in a heart fully surrendered to God. They are also prophetic, pointing toward Christ, salvation, and the ultimate fulfillment of God's plan, offering glimpses of divine wisdom and eternal truth that remain relevant across time. But the Psalms do more than reflect our emotions. They shape them. They instruct us in how to pray, how to trust, and how to rejoice, even amid trials. They remind us that God's covenant is unshakable, that His mercy is constant, and that His faithfulness endures through generations. Every psalm, whether a lament, a thanksgiving, or a song of praise, is an invitation to step closer to Jesus, to experience His presence, and to allow His words to transform our hearts. In this video, we will explore the complete story of the Book of Psalms like you've never seen it before. We will uncover the heart of worship, the depths of human emotion, the prophetic voice, the record of God's covenant, and the power of prayer and personal transformation. By the end, you will see the Psalms not just as words on a page, but as living expressions of faith that speak to your soul, guiding, comforting, and inspiring you to a deeper, more intimate walk with Jesus. Part 1. The Heart of Worship. The Book of Psalms opens a window into the very heart of humanity's relationship with God. From the first psalm to the last, it reveals that worship is the foundation of spiritual life and the conduit through which we draw close to Jesus. Worship, as portrayed in the Psalms, is far more than singing songs or reciting prayers. It is a posture of the heart, a deliberate orientation toward God that encompasses surrender, gratitude, reverence, and authenticity. It is about presenting ourselves fully, honestly, and vulnerably before the Creator, acknowledging His sovereignty, His love, and His guidance in every aspect of life. The psalmists teach us that worship is dynamic and living. It is not a set of rituals, but a conversation that allows us to express our deepest fears, joys, hopes, and confusions, knowing that God meets us with understanding and care. Worship in the Psalms is intensely personal, yet profoundly communal. When we praise God, we are connecting not only to Him, but also to countless generations of believers who have expressed similar devotion. The words of the psalmists link us to a living lineage of faith, a chain of hearts reaching toward God across centuries. This demonstrates that worship is both an intimate encounter and a shared experience, where individual honesty becomes part of a greater chorus of praise and devotion. The psalmists cry out in despair, rejoice in victory, confess sin, and proclaim God's greatness, showing that worship embraces the entire human condition. It is not reserved for moments of comfort, celebration, or triumph. It is especially transformative in moments of struggle, grief, and uncertainty. Through the Psalms, we see that worship is not about perfection. It is about authenticity, the willingness to show God our hearts fully, and the courage to express both joy and pain in His presence. One of the most striking aspects of the Psalms is the centrality of gratitude. The psalmists consistently recount God's deeds in creation, acts of deliverance, provision, and justice. Gratitude, as depicted in the Psalms, is active and intentional. It cultivates awareness, directing our attention to God's ongoing work in our lives and in the world. Worship is thus not passive. It engages the mind, stirs the heart, and shapes actions. By recognizing and responding to God's faithfulness, the believer develops a rhythm of praise and thanksgiving that sustains faith through trials, strengthens trust, and deepens intimacy with Jesus. The Psalms show that worship is a holistic act. It involves thought, emotion, and behavior all working together in alignment with God's will. Moreover, the Psalms demonstrate that worship can take many forms. It can be a song of rejoicing, a spoken prayer, silent meditation, or a life lived intentionally in service to God. The poetic and melodic nature of the Psalms elevates ordinary experiences into encounters with the divine, showing that every moment can be infused with the presence of Jesus. Worship is not limited to sacred buildings or public ceremonies. It can permeate private devotion, daily routines, and moments of joy, suffering, or reflection. The Psalms teach that worship is relational and transformational, shaping the way we think, feel, and act, and drawing us into a deeper, more intimate connection with God. The psalmists also emphasize that authentic worship is inseparable from moral alignment. True praise flows from a heart committed to righteousness, justice, and faithfulness. Words of worship without corresponding actions lose their power. Through the Psalms, we learn that worship involves aligning our decisions, relationships, and behaviors with God's principles. A life of integrity, guided by worshipful devotion, reflects God's presence to the world and strengthens the believer's character, resilience, and spiritual depth. Finally, the Psalms highlight that worship is transformative, not only individually, but communally. Through centuries, the songs of the psalmists have united believers across time, creating a shared spiritual experience that spans generations. Engaging with the Psalms today allows us to join that chorus, connecting our personal devotion to the eternal story of faith. The heart of worship, as revealed in the Psalms, is sincerity, vulnerability, and devotion to God. A worship that transforms individuals, strengthens communities, and draws believers into a closer, more intimate relationship with Jesus. Worship shapes the believer's character, informs every decision, and provides a foundation of hope and faith that carries through every season of life. Part 2. The depth of human emotion. The Psalms stand out in Scripture because they embrace the full spectrum of human emotion, showing that faith and feeling are inseparable. The psalmists do not shy away from expressing joy, sorrow, fear, anger, hope, grief, or gratitude. They validate the raw, authentic experience of being human and reveal that every emotion can be brought honestly before Jesus. Every tear, cry, and exclamation recorded in the Psalms is met with divine attentiveness, care, and love. These expressions are not weaknesses but powerful avenues for drawing near to God, deepening intimacy, and strengthening spiritual resilience. Lamentation is a recurring and vital theme. The psalmists openly express despair, anguish, and confusion, calling out to God for deliverance, justice, or guidance. Lament is not a sign of weak faith. It demonstrates trust even in the midst of suffering. By expressing pain honestly, believers find that God strengthens, comforts, and transforms their hearts. Conversely, the Psalms contain exuberant expressions of joy and thanksgiving, celebrating God's goodness, provision, and faithfulness. Gratitude becomes an act of worship that amplifies spiritual vitality, reminding believers to recognize the divine hand in every blessing. Human emotion in the Psalms is intertwined with reflection, discernment, and spiritual growth. Joy without gratitude can lead to pride. Sorrow without trust can lead to despair. Anger without surrender can turn into bitterness. The psalmists model the integration of emotional authenticity with faithful response, demonstrating that emotion should lead us toward dependence on God rather than away from Him. Engaging with the Psalms provides guidance for navigating life's emotional complexity, cultivating resilience, and anchoring faith in God's promises. Emotion is also communal. The expressions of hope, fear, grief, and joy resonate across generations, linking believers in a shared spiritual experience. The Psalms validate personal feelings, normalize honest communication with God, and provide language for emotions that are difficult to express. They connect individual hearts to a larger body of faith, showing that our personal expressions matter in a collective spiritual journey. The transformative power of emotion in the Psalms is profound. Honest expression opens the soul to God's presence, invites His intervention, and shapes perspective, trust, and behavior. By embracing emotional authenticity, believers experience comfort, guidance, and reassurance in deep and life-changing ways. Emotion becomes a channel through which Jesus speaks, strengthens, and molds spiritual maturity. Ultimately, the Psalms teach that human emotion is not a barrier to faith, but a bridge to intimacy with God. Joy, grief, hope, and lament all have a place in worship and spiritual life. By engaging with these texts, believers learn to approach God honestly, trust Him fully with every feeling, and allow the full spectrum of human experience to draw them into a transformative relationship with Jesus. The Psalms reveal that a living faith is dynamic, human, and deeply relational, offering guidance, comfort, and connection for every stage and season of life. Part 3. Prophecy and Divine Guidance. The Psalms are far more than poetic reflections or expressions of human emotion. They are a profound source of prophecy and divine guidance. They reveal God's eternal plan for humanity, pointing toward the life, ministry, suffering, and triumph of Jesus Christ, while offering timeless instruction for living faithfully. The psalmists, inspired by the Holy Spirit, weave into their songs glimpses of God's redemptive work, showing how divine guidance unfolds in every circumstance. Prophecy and guidance are inseparable in the Psalms, linking God's eternal purposes with practical advice for personal, moral, and spiritual development. They remind believers that every life devoted to God is part of a larger divine narrative, and that faithfulness aligns them with God's eternal plan. Many psalms contain messianic prophecies. Psalm 22, for example, depicts suffering, abandonment, and ultimate deliverance, foreshadowing the crucifixion of Christ. The psalmist describes pain, ridicule, and despair, yet also proclaims trust in God's saving power. Psalm 110 emphasizes the eternal priesthood and authority of the Messiah, illustrating Christ's enduring reign and divine authority. These prophetic passages are embedded in prayers, praises, and laments, showing that prophecy is not abstract prediction, it is practical and instructive, guiding the believer's faith and shaping their understanding of God's unfolding plan. By studying these texts, believers can see that prophecy encourages hope, trust, and perseverance, even amid trials. Beyond prophecy, the Psalms provide direct guidance for life. They teach humility, mercy, justice, integrity, and reliance on God. The psalmists remind us that God evaluates the heart, not merely outward behavior, and that obedience and devotion are inseparable. In moments of doubt, fear, or ethical ambiguity, the Psalms encourage turning to God in prayer, reflection, and meditation. This guidance is both relational and actionable. It shapes decisions, informs moral choices, and cultivates resilience and spiritual depth. Engaging with the Psalms teaches believers how to navigate challenges with discernment, courage, and faith, knowing God's wisdom is available and His guidance reliable. The Psalms also demonstrate that divine guidance often comes through trials. Lamentation, a recurring theme, is not a sign of weak faith, but a method of seeking God's intervention and understanding. The psalmists express pain, fear, and doubt honestly while maintaining trust in God's faithfulness. By lamenting before God, believers learn patience, perseverance, and spiritual insight. Trials become moments for divine teaching, enabling the believer to grow in character, wisdom, and reliance on God. The Psalms show that guidance is most profound when it intersects with human experience, shaping faith through challenge as well as reflection. Community and social responsibility are also addressed in the Psalms. The psalmists emphasize ethical conduct, justice, and compassion, demonstrating that obedience to God has implications beyond the individual. Following divine guidance affects relationships, strengthens communities, and reflects God's character in society. Meditation on the Psalms deepens understanding, internalizing spiritual truths that inform personal behavior, communal life, and moral decision-making. The poetic structure, imagery, and repetition in the Psalms create layers of meaning, enabling spiritual reflection to guide both thought and action. Prophecy and guidance in the Psalms reinforce the constancy and reliability of God's presence. By recounting past deliverances, provision, and protection, the psalmists assure believers that God's wisdom, timing, and plan are perfect. The Psalms show that prophecy is not merely future prediction. It is a guide for living faithfully in alignment with God's will. These texts teach that divine guidance is relational, actionable, and transformative, giving believers confidence in navigating life's trials and making decisions rooted in trust and obedience. Ultimately, Part 3 demonstrates that the Psalms are a living source of prophecy and guidance. They point to Jesus, instruct in righteous living, and provide wisdom for personal and communal life. By meditating on these sacred texts, believers gain clarity, hope, courage, and discernment, confident that God's presence, plan, and guidance are active in their lives. The Psalms teach that prophecy invites trust, obedience, and spiritual transformation, offering a roadmap for a life deeply aligned with God's eternal purposes. Part 4. Covenant and God's faithfulness. Among the most central themes of the Psalms is God's covenant and His unwavering faithfulness. The psalmists consistently highlight that God is intimately involved in the lives of His people, offering guidance, protection, provision, and sustenance across generations. His covenant provides stability, hope, and reassurance, even in times of suffering, uncertainty, or trial. God's love is steadfast, His promises reliable, and His plan for His people perfect. Believers are encouraged to trust Him fully, knowing that His covenant extends into every aspect of life and every season, offering divine assurance and unshakable hope. The Psalms describe the covenant in multiple dimensions: God's protection, provision, justice, and ultimate salvation. The psalmists recount his past acts of deliverance, demonstrating that God's faithfulness is constant and reliable. Remembering God's interventions cultivates trust in his present guidance and assurance for the future. Even when life feels uncertain, recalling God's faithfulness strengthens perseverance, patience, and spiritual resilience. The covenant is not theoretical, it is lived, relational, and experienced in the day-to-day life of believers, shaping their actions, attitudes, and choices. God's faithfulness is revealed through his ongoing protection and provision. The Psalms describe God as a shield, provider, and refuge, responding to prayer, meeting needs, and offering comfort in distress. These assurances instill peace, courage, and confidence. Believers are reminded that God's presence is active and relational, not distant or abstract. Covenant faithfulness demonstrates that divine promises are accessible, practical, and transformative, shaping believers' spiritual growth and fortifying their hearts against fear, doubt, and uncertainty. The covenant also calls for a faithful response. Obedience, worship, devotion, and ethical conduct are the natural expressions of trust in God's covenant. Alignment with God's will is both inner and outward, integrating thought, word, and deed. Living in accordance with the covenant strengthens intimacy with Jesus, fosters moral character, and enables believers to experience the transformative power of God's promises. The Psalms show that faithfulness is relational, active, and reciprocal. God provides guidance, provision, and protection, and believers respond through devotion, obedience, and integrity. Covenant faithfulness combines justice and mercy. Although human imperfection is recognized, God's willingness to forgive, restore, and sustain his people is repeatedly affirmed. Even amid lament, doubt, or fear, God's steadfast love provides comfort, instruction, and hope. The covenant teaches that divine faithfulness encompasses moral guidance, practical direction, and relational care, reassuring believers that God's promises can be trusted and his presence relied upon. Ultimately, Part 4 emphasizes that God's covenant and faithfulness are central to the Psalms. They assure believers that his promises are living, eternal, and active. Trusting in God's faithfulness provides courage, hope, and resilience. By embracing these truths, believers gain spiritual depth and confidence, knowing that God's love and guidance sustain them through every challenge. The Psalms show that covenant faithfulness is personal, experiential, and transformative, equipping believers to live with integrity, devotion, and hope, secure in the knowledge that God's promises will carry them through life into eternity. Part 5. The power of prayer and praise. The Psalms consistently reveal that prayer and praise are not mere rituals. They are the lifeblood of a believer's relationship with God. Through heartfelt prayer, the psalmists demonstrate how to approach Jesus with honesty, vulnerability, and faith. They do not hide their fears, doubts, or anger. They bring every aspect of the human experience before God, trusting that he listens, understands, and responds in his perfect timing. Prayer, as expressed in the Psalms, is both intimate and powerful. It transforms the individual from within, shaping character, perspective, and emotional resilience. The psalmists teach that prayer is not about perfection or eloquence, but about sincerity and openness, a conversation with the divine that connects the heart to God's infinite wisdom and love. Praise, on the other hand, elevates the soul and refocuses the believer's attention on God's greatness. The Psalms show that praise is not limited to moments of joy or victory. It is most meaningful when offered amidst trials, sorrow, or confusion. By praising God in adversity, the believer acknowledges His sovereignty, trusts in His guidance, and aligns the heart with divine truth. The psalmists often intertwine prayer and praise, demonstrating that lament can coexist with adoration, and that cries for help can be framed within declarations of God's faithfulness. This dual practice transforms despair into hope, fear into courage, and uncertainty into confidence in God's providence. Prayer in the Psalms is multifaceted. Some prayers are petitions for deliverance from enemies or adversity. Others seek guidance in moral or spiritual dilemmas, and still others express thanksgiving for God's provision and protection. Each type of prayer illustrates a deep, ongoing conversation with Jesus, a model for contemporary believers to engage honestly and regularly with God. These prayers show that God responds not only to words but to hearts committed to seeking Him, teaching that intimacy with God is cultivated through both speech and attitude. Praise, similarly, is depicted as an active and intentional practice. It can be expressed through singing, spoken words, or meditative reflection. The psalmists encourage believers to remember God's deeds in creation, acts of deliverance, and manifestations of justice and mercy. Praise is not merely acknowledgement, but an active recognition of God's ongoing work in the world and in one's life. This awareness cultivates gratitude, deepens trust, and reinforces the believer's spiritual resilience. It also transforms ordinary experiences into opportunities for worship, allowing everyday life to become infused with sacred meaning. Together, prayer and praise create a rhythm that sustains faith. They enable believers to navigate life's challenges while remaining anchored in God's presence. Through persistent prayer, the heart learns patience and dependence. Through praise, the soul experiences joy, gratitude, and alignment with divine will. The Psalms demonstrate that this combination of lament, petition, thanksgiving, and adoration forms the foundation of spiritual maturity, providing both comfort and guidance. The Psalms also illustrate the communal dimension of prayer and praise. Public worship, corporate recitation, and shared songs strengthen the faith community, reinforcing collective trust in God's providence and covenant. Participating in communal prayer and praise allows individual devotion to merge with a larger chorus of faith, creating a profound spiritual synergy. Through this shared practice, believers experience the power of unity, encouragement, and mutual spiritual growth. Ultimately, Part 5 teaches that prayer and praise are the twin engines of a vibrant spiritual life. They cultivate intimacy with Jesus, fortify faith, and foster resilience in every season of life. By praying openly and praising consistently, believers engage fully with God's presence, aligning their hearts with His will and drawing strength from His faithfulness. The Psalms reveal that these practices are not ancillary, but central to spiritual transformation, offering guidance, comfort, and empowerment to live faithfully, hope confidently, and experience the fullness of God's love. Conclusion. The Book of Psalms, when explored in its entirety, reveals a divine tapestry of worship, emotion, prophecy, covenant, and guidance. It teaches that life with God is dynamic, encompassing joy and sorrow, praise and lament, hope and trust. Every psalm offers a window into human experience, a mirror reflecting the heart, and a pathway toward God's presence. Through authentic worship, honest expression of emotion, understanding of divine prophecy, embrace of God's covenant, and diligent practice of prayer and praise, believers are drawn into a closer, transformative relationship with Jesus. The Psalms remind us that God is not distant or indifferent. He is present, faithful, and responsive. They call us to trust Him in all circumstances, to align our hearts with His will, and to live lives marked by integrity, devotion, and hope. By engaging deeply with these sacred songs, believers gain wisdom, resilience, and confidence that God's promises endure forever. The Psalms offer a comprehensive guide for living faithfully, cultivating spiritual depth, and experiencing the abundant life promised by Jesus. In every verse, the Psalms encourage us to approach life with authenticity, surrender, and devotion. They reveal that human emotion is valuable, that prayer transforms the heart, and that praise honors God and strengthens the soul. They show that prophecy guides, covenant sustains, and divine faithfulness is unwavering. By embracing these truths, believers are empowered to navigate life's trials, rejoice in God's goodness, and anchor their hope in His eternal promises. Ultimately, the Book of Psalms is a guide, a comfort, and a source of inspiration. It invites every believer to enter into a living, transformative relationship with Jesus, experiencing His presence in every season, trusting His guidance in every circumstance, and rejoicing in His eternal faithfulness. In the Psalms we see the full story of God's interaction with humanity, a story that is deeply personal, universally relevant, and eternally hopeful.